My name is Chef Scott Fausz. I'm the executive pastry chef for Alyeska Resort in the Hotel Alyeska. And today I'm fortunate enough to be able to show you our most famous dessert, the baked Alyeska. We cover in meringue, looks sort of like the mountain, Mount Alyeska, and we have a garnish that we place on top that looks like the Northern Lights. Classic baked Alaska is actually made from ice cream, and we're doing ours from mousse. Both of my recipes today call for sheet gelatin, and it calls for the gelatin to be already bloomed, so I have the sheet gelatin just setting aside in water until I'm ready to use it. So one of the first steps that we have to complete is to make sure that we're ready to go. I have a stainless steel bowl, and I'm going to prep it by spraying it with pan spray, and then we're going to place a sheet of plastic wrap on the inside, and I'm going to lay it down as smoothly as I can. The plastic wrap allows us later on, once the dessert is completely assembled and frozen, to be able to invert the bowl, and we'll use the plastic wrap to help unmold it onto the platter. So we're going to make a mousse. A mousse, by definition, is a dessert that's made light by the incorporation of whipped cream, egg whites, or both. And so today, making the raspberry mousse, the first step, we're going to take raspberry puree. I'm going to take half of it, I'm going to heat it with some of the sugar so that the sugar is dissolved completely. And while that mixture is warm, I'm going to add my bloom gelatin to it so that it melts. I will add the second incorporation of the raspberry puree to it, which cools it down so that when I add the whipped cream, which is the final step to make this a light dessert, the whipped cream doesn't melt, which it would if I added it to something that's hot. So earlier today, I made a small batch of the raspberry mousse, the same size batch that we just made. And this was sitting in the refrigerator for a little while, so the gelatin that we talked about had a chance to stabilize this mixture. It actually just takes about an hour or so in order for it to firm up, so it firms up pretty quickly. Now for the next step, we have chocolate cake, your favorite chocolate cake recipe, or if you don't have chocolate cake at home, you can get pound cake at the grocery store. You just slice it into nice thin layers, and you can layer it over the top of the mousse. All right, so the chocolate mousse is a little bit more complicated than the raspberry mousse, but it's worth it because it's so good. I'm going to whip cream first. I'm going to whip the cream to medium peak. That's usually the perfect texture whenever you're making a mousse. There are going to be two separate incorporations of sugar. There's one part of the sugar that goes with the egg yolk. The other part of the sugar goes with the cream. I'm going to use the same whip attachment. I'm going to take the addition of sugar and I'm going to place it directly on top of the egg yolks. We're going to whisk that at high speed until you'll see the volume of the egg yolk and the sugar increases. The color is going to change to a light lemon color. This is what's going to provide a little bit of the volume that we need to make our mousse nice and light. So what we're trying to do now is make sure enough air is incorporated so that we have a nice, light, fluffy consistency for final mousse. So next, just to let you know, I'm going to heat the cream in the microwave. We need to be able to melt the gelatin. So we just want to get it really hot, but not to the boiling point. And if by chance the gelatin isn't completely dissolved, it's really easy to do. Just put it back in the microwave for a little bit. Remember to not boil it. We just want to get it nice and hot. So I'm going to heat this in the microwave, maybe about 30 seconds. I'll pour the hot cream over the chocolate. If it's not all completely melted by the heat of the cream, you can go ahead and put it back in the microwave for a little bit. Chocolate's also really delicate, so it'll burn easily. All right, so you can see now that our chocolate has melted. I'm just stirring it together so that any lumps of chocolate that might be left in there are completely melted out. I'm going to add this to our whipped egg yolk and sugar mixture. Before I do, I want to show you the color that you should be looking for. Remember that this will have increased in volume, and the color should be light lemony in color. All right, so I'm going to add the chocolate. Now that I have the chocolate in here, knowing that there's gelatin in here as well, we've just placed it on something that's cold. I need to make sure that I very quickly incorporate the ingredients so that the gelatin doesn't set up. I'm going to put this back on the mixer, and I'm going to whip it for just a little bit until it's combined. Still a little bit of streak in there. I'm going to fold this together so that we have a nice uniform mixture. Okay, so we're going to go back to the cream that we whipped earlier. This is the medium peak cream that we're going to add to this. A little bit at a time, about 25% can go into the mousse base, and I'm going to start to just very carefully and gently fold this mixture. So this is the last incorporation of cream. And notice that whenever I'm folding, I'm going down to the bottom of the bowl and I'm pulling what's on the bottom of the bowl and placing it on top, just very carefully. What I want to avoid doing is stirring it or kind of mashing it. That's what presses out the air. I'm going to go ahead and place this chocolate mousse on top of the cake that's already been placed on top of the raspberry mousse. And I have my last layer of cake, and this is going to get set directly on top of the chocolate mousse. And then we're going to place this in the freezer where it needs to rest overnight. So this is going to freeze completely, and it's going to allow us the next day or whenever you're ready to finish it to remove it from the bowl easily. Okay, so the next component, step 3, we're nearing the end, is chocolate ganache. Chocolate ganache is classically made from equal parts of chocolate and cream. We're going to heat the cream to a boil and pour it over the chocolate. It's important that if you're using chocolate to make sure that it's already finely chopped. If it's not, go ahead and break it up into small pieces so that it melts very quickly and evenly. So this time the cream has to come to a boil or it's not going to be hot enough to melt the chocolate. So I'm just going to line a sheet pan or a tray, or you could just use a platter. A little bit of plastic wrap that's going to contain any mess or overage that spills over the side of our Alyeska. I'm going to use a cake pan. I'm going to place this directly in the center of the pan, and I'm going to unmold the frozen Alyeska. Carefully pull it off and place it directly on top. I'm going to check the cream, and our cream has just come to a boil. I'm going to pour it over the chopped chocolate. I'm going to let it set for 30 seconds, a minute, so that that heat can melt that chocolate. We're not going to have to do much work whenever we whisk it. So this being a 1-to-1 ratio is great for icing or for coating something. You can also make a whipping ganache, which is 2 parts cream to 1 part chocolate, and in a pinch you could whip that up too and make a mousse. So while this is liquid, I'm going to pour this over the frozen Alyeska. If you pour it on a platter, you can the extra ganache will pool underneath of it, and then you can lift it off or just scrape around it. So the final step is for us to make the meringue, which is the coating on the outside. Meringue is important. This is what gives it the appearance of the snowy mountain or snowball. So meringue powder is pretty easy to make. You can make it from egg whites that you're separating out from the yolks. We're using a pre-made egg white powder. So it's powdered egg white albumin. So I have the first incorporation of sugar, the meringue powder, and the hot water. I'm going to add the whip attachment. We're going to whip this until the sugar is dissolved and it foams up and it turns nice and white. At which time we'll add the second incorporation of sugar and continue to whip it until we have a beautiful bowl of white and fluffy meringue. All right, so now this is the finished meringue product. So we whip this up until it's nice and stiff. So you can see how beautiful and white it looks, kind of like snow. So we're gonna take this meringue and we're gonna spread it all over the top of the ganached Alyeska. So I'm gonna place this onto a platter first, and then I'm gonna spread the Alyeska over. I'm gonna use a gloved hand, or you can also use an icing spatula, or you could pipe it onto, whichever is easiest for you. I'm not too worried about the mess because I can wipe that off. I want to make sure that the coating of meringue is about a ½ inch thick. We say baked Alyeska is supposed to represent the snow-covered Mount Alyeska. You can see why. Looks like a big snowball. So you can meringue this up to 6 hours in advance and let it sit in your refrigerator. So the dessert is served at refrigerator temperature, not frozen. So the fun part for everybody is to use the blowtorch. If you don't have a blowtorch, don't worry. You can put this underneath of the broiler for a couple of minutes on high, all right? And I'm lightly going to blowtorch this so that the sugars in the meringue caramelize I'm looking for a beautiful golden brown color. Everybody loves the flavor of toasted marshmallow. And there you have a finished baked Alyeska.